for the morning sessions. This is exciting. I am, if you were not here yesterday, my name is Frances Pollock. I am the director of the Cultural Innovation Lab here at Yale. And I am, again, these 2 days are it's like a warm hug for me. This is the 4th year of the Yale Innovation Summit, and a lot of you have been here the whole time. So I just wanted to thank you for building this, because really it's not me, it's us. So if you could give yourselves a round of applause, thank you. This next panel, I gave Chris mad props last panel because he bullishly said, I want to, Chris, I'm giving you props again. Because he said, we're coming, give us a room, we're doing something great, and y'all need to hear about it. I said, come on, that's easy. And I wanted to give Emil the same props. So Emil Kang is a good friend of mine and also one of my entrepreneurs in residence at the Cultural Innovation Lab. And Emil said, I also have things that I want to say and things that I'm thinking about and ways in which I can provoke in a way that is maybe not so, accepted in other art spaces. And I said, Emil, I love a provocation, especially from you. So Emil has put together this incredible panel. But first about Emil. So y'all come on up. Emil, are you going to introduce yourself, or can I introduce you?
Please.
Okay. So like I said, Emil is one of my entrepreneurs in residence at Yale Ventures. He serves on the National Council of the Arts. Most recently, he served as the program director for arts and culture at the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. So he was the guy, which was intimidating when I met him. Before that, he founded Carolina Performing Arts at UNC Chapel Hill and ran it for 15 years. And before that, he was the president and executive director of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. And he's a violinist. So everything that he has done has been inside the nonprofit art system. And so if there are things to think about within the nonprofit art system, he knows them and is going to be a good person to talk to us about this. To his left is Yancey Strickler, who is a writer and entrepreneur and a co-founder of Kickstarter, which is a little company that some of us have heard about and benefited from. He's the author of This Could Be Our Future and the creator of the Dark Forest Theory on the internet. His newest project, which I'm most excited about, is the A Corp, which is a new legal structure for creative practices, which was just passed by the Colorado General Assembly with bipartisan support. So it's just waiting for the governor's signature, right?
Yeah, in the next week it will be signed into law.
In the next week, it will be signed into law. And as someone who has just done some similar negotiation with another state, oh my God, can we give it up again just for the ability to do anything? And then to Yancey's right is Kaneza, who works in theater, opera, and film. She's directed the 2023 Pulitzer Prize-winning opera, Omar. And Kaneza, I don't even think that we talked about this, but Michael Abels is my cousin.
Hey!
Weird? I know, but it's real. Yeah, anyways, we'll talk about that later. So love your work, and thank you for supporting my family. She's been presented at BAM, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and on stages from Europe, opera houses to East African amphitheaters. She also founded I want to say this correctly, it's Gihanga Institute for Contemporary Art in Kigali, Rwanda, the first purpose-built space for art in East Africa. And then finally, as just a little nobody who I've never met or spent any time with at all. No, David. So David is someone very important to me because David was my composition professor here at Yale. And he's a wonderful pedagogue. He's an incredible thinker. We've had many, bites of cheese and sips of wine over which we've discussed everything from economic theory to, Schoenberg, and everything in between and the merits of both. But the thing that I think the public knows him for is he's the Pulitzer Prize winner and co-founder of Bang on a Can, which is, if you don't know him, one of the most influential new music collectives in the country. He is one of the most well-performed composers in America. His oratorio, The Wealth of Nation, inspired by Adam Smith, was just premiered by the New York Philharmonic. And he's been faculty here at Yale for 20 years, which is amazing. Yeah. So this is an incredible panel, and thank you so much, Emil, for making us program it. It's the right thing to do. So without further ado.
Thank you, Francis. Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, great. I will project as per the instructions of the last panel. I just want to start with a statement. In this country, if you want to build something as an artist, the first thing the system asks you to do is to give it away. It's called a nonprofit. The nonprofit, as we know, has served as a default container for arts and culture in this country for nearly 70 years. It's built the orchestras, the theaters, the museums that we know. I've spent, as we heard, 35 years inside that system, leading symphony orchestras, running a performing arts center, and more recently, leading the arts at a major foundation. I've seen what makes it possible. And while it did somewhat of a good job creating legacy institutions, it's also perpetuated a scarcity mindset and deficit narrative and in its framing as charity. More concerning is the trickle-down impact on individual artists and the tunnel vision many artists have had leading into the nearly 150,000 arts nonprofits we have across the country today. At every stage, I've watched the same thing happen. An artist has a vision. To pursue it, the system tells them to create a nonprofit in order to solicit gifts and grants. The moment they do, they give up ownership of the thing that they built. It's now considered a charity. They can't hold equity. They can't build wealth from their own work. They answer to a board. Their time goes to fundraising and compliance, and without any intervention, they own nothing. At Mellon, we understood that challenge, that in order to reduce dependence on charitable dollars, we needed to begin to address the larger systemic proliferation of nonprofits and the need to look at asset ownership and wealth creation for artists. We were one of the only funders to award grants to for-profits directly through expenditure responsibility grant making. But as we all know, one funder changing its practices doesn't build an ecosystem, and an ecosystem is what we need. What artists have never had is the infrastructure that every other sector treats as a given. Look around this summit alone. When a biotech entrepreneur has a breakthrough idea, they have a mature ecosystem. They don't worry about how to price their eventual drug. They have incubators, accelerators, venture capital, legal frameworks, developmental scaffolding, an entire support system designed for the journey from concept to market. When an artist has a transformative vision, they face two options: secure institutional validation or figure it out alone. And the default becomes to start a nonprofit because then their enterprise becomes legible. The starving artist trope isn't a romantic reality, it's a policy failure. The title of this panel, Beyond Nonprofit, Building What Artists Can Own, the word that matters most in that title is own. And I'm joined by three brilliant humans who've been approaching this question uniquely for years. We have an elder, forgive me, David, who's been challenging the system for decades.
American treasure.
We have Kaneza, who represents the generation of now, consistently rejecting the systems that she has inherited. And we have Yancey, a serial entrepreneur and systems thinker and systems builder. So the question we're here today to answer is, what does it actually take to build something an artist can own? I'm going to ask each of our panelists to share briefly how they arrived at this question or how they arrive at this question. Then we'll be in conversation for the rest of the hour. We'll have some time at the end for your questions, so please think about what you might want to ask our panelists. I'm going to just share a little bit of an opening for each, just to give you a sense of my relationship with them, and then we'll get started. I first met David more than 30 years ago, so I guess I'm an elder as well, when I was a receptionist at the American Composers Orchestra. He had founded Bang on a Can in the late 80s. That's decades of inventing institutional structures from scratch, not because he wanted to be an institution builder or leader, but because the structures didn't exist for the work he wanted to do. David, can you start us off and share how you arrived at this panel today and how you answer that question? What does it take to actually build something an artist can own?
Thank you. Thank you. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay. representing senior citizens everywhere. So we're here in this conference which says innovation everywhere. I mean, everything says innovation. It even says innovation on this microphone head, right? So I am a classical musician. I teach at Yale. I did my doctorate at Yale. I'm totally nerdy classical musician. And to say innovation in classical music is kind of like an oxymoron, because the whole point of classical music is to say, you know that thing that happened 200 years ago? That was really good. We should really remember that, and we should build a whole society around keeping all of that alive. And so the interesting thing about that is that that music is really good, right? There's something really valuable about keeping that music alive, which is great. The problem with that kind of worship of the past is that you get the structures that support that, you get the educational system that supports it, you get the funders who support it, you get all of these things that are inherited. We teach music at Yale roughly the same way we would have taught music 200 years ago in Vienna. That's the same thing. And so that's a problem when you are a composer and when you are trying to do something new. So when I graduated from Yale, I moved to New York with two friends, Michael Gordon and Julia Wolf, who also both graduated from here. And we looked around and we realized it's really hard to do the things that we want to do as composers, making new music for the classical music audience, for the classical music societies which exist. And we need to think of a way that's going to support the world that we want to belong to. And what we realized was in order to do that, we had to build the entire context for this music that we wanted to do up from ground zero. We started an organization called Bang on a Can. I'm not going to go into it because I could, of course, talk for hours and hours. But we decided we needed a new audience, we needed new venues, we decided we were only going to do things in the art world. We started back in the era when we had to invite people to concerts, so we bought mailing lists, and we bought mailing lists of people who went to see art, theater, dance, poetry, film, but we deliberately did not send to anyone who went to music or went to concerts, because we thought, if you like what we do, you'll find out about it. We did everything we could do, and so as part of that, we have now, we're coming up on our 40th year. We have a school for young composers and performers from around the world. We have a festival in New York, which just concluded, called Long Play, which this year was 4 days of music, 70 concerts, all in walking distance of each other in Brooklyn, where you buy a pass and you go in, and it has a whole range of music from experimental classical to experimental jazz, experimental improvise, experimental pop. We have a festival over the summer. But I do want to say this one thing about ownership, because what was since I realized now that I'm reading the title of this panel that that's what this is, we very quickly realized that when you have a not-for-profit, you're making something that the state owns, that you don't own. And so one of the things that happened as kind of like an ancillary part of our ecosystem is we actually started 3 organizations. We started Bang on a Can, which is a not-for-profit. We started our own publishing company called Red Poppy, which is for-profit. And we started our own record label called Cantaloupe, which is for-profit. And the whole idea was because there are different parts of your life that you can control and different parts of your life that you need to depend on. And of course, I could talk about all these for hours, but I won't.
Thank you, David. Kaneza. I met Kaneza more than 10 years ago at a Creative Capital Artist Retreat, and we've been in conversation about the lack of economic agency for artists ever since. Kaneza, as you heard, is not just navigating this issue here in the US, but also in East Africa. Kaneza, how do you arrive at this session today?
Emil told us, mine's not. Here we go. Emil told us to think about this through our own personal stories, and now I have, as I'm sitting here, realized how right he is, and I'm catching up. So, I come from squatters
and people who lived on communes. So folks who were thinking about building home and betting on each other outside of state-sanctioned agreements about financial structures, often in opposition to state-sanctioned agreements about financial structures. So as an artist, I've always come from an understanding that how you build, let's call it wealth, and dear God, I direct opera and make experimental theater, so I don't mean money when I say wealth. How you build wealth is building home space that allows you to bet on yourself and bet on others. That has been fundamental to practice to me. I came up, I will choose for the sake of this panel to say I came up in the New York City experimental theater scene that is run by not-for-profit theater companies such as the Wooster Group and Elevator Repair Service, if any of you are complete nerds. That model, there is no, someone's been working for the company for 35 years, she wants to buy a house, she has no money. It's not like the building that the theater company owns can be leveraged for her mortgage. No, because it's a not-for-profit. Wealth is in there. Okay. I was very clear I would not be starting a not-for-profit. I knew that from the get-go. I had that advantage. That maybe is the generational difference, is I knew not to start a not-for-profit. I knew it wasn't going to be the kind of home space that was about, particularly if you don't come from generational wealth, the risk it takes to bet on yourself. That being said, I like doing things otherwise. I like fighting with big institutions that have $4 million a year. And to fight at institutional scale, I had to learn how to throw my weight around with people who had a lot more money than me. So a lot of my early work was about how to build collective structures between artists that allowed us to fight with big institutions, to do things otherwise, to invite audiences who historically had been disinvited, to take care of artists who they had no business even understanding the lives of. That was a lot about networks between people. The other part of my life that relates to this, particularly as we get to the kind of tax code required to do the kind of work we're talking about, I have founded Gihanga Institute for Contemporary Art in Kigali, where much of my family is, thinking about kind of hyper-local contexts for global conversation. That if we're going to talk to each other at a global scale, dear God, what is the land you're standing on and what is your relationship to it? From that position, we have this crazy opportunity because Rwanda has been flooded with development aid. Anyone who doesn't know, there was a massive genocide in 1994, tons of rebuilding, it's like levels of development, horrific levels of development aid, but the government knows it and has started making crazy business deals in the world. So we have this little opportunity to think outside of the development aid model at a federal level around tax code. So one of the things we're thinking about right now is what is the model we want to build that isn't based on patronage that built all that beautiful music in Vienna, and what are the other ways we can actually build sustainable models inside the federal government, which I imagine we'll get to later. Thank you, Emil.
Thank you, Kaneza. That was the perfect segue. I first met Yancey also more than 10 years ago at an NEA event, and he has been consistently trying to address the needs of artists and arts practitioners in our society. You've heard about Artists Corporation, but Yancey, just talk us a little bit about how you're showing up here today.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you for being here. Being in the spirit of just speaking as myself, I grew up on a farm in Southwest Virginia, pretty poor. Father, a country musician and traveling waterbed salesman. My mom, a secretary at a university. And so I grew up in a creative household and creative life, but didn't have money, never thought of it that way. And I'm used to not belonging to things. I haven't been invited to any nice institutions in my life. Everything has sort of been off in my own weird corner, and through that have built a kind of a self-reliance, collective resilience that was about being a music critic and starting a tiny record label and just sort of standing for the things I cared about, and became starting Kickstarter and a way of thinking about people like us who weren't connected and had ideas and had no idea how in the world to move forward with them, and trying to make a path where it didn't matter where you went to school. What mattered was your enthusiasm and the quality of your idea and how hard you're willing to work for it. And, you know, continue to be on a sort of a path like that, I guess. And the last few years just was really seeing my own creative life and the creative lives of my friends in just more systemic ways, and thinking more about the structures we're a part of. And a lot of the work we did at Kickstarter was around experimenting in corporate forms. We were one of the first public benefit corporations, so we're a for-profit that its purpose is not to just maximize revenue, it's to maximize benefits for artists as well as to continue as an institution. And so seeing the power of those sorts of subtle, deeper design choices. And so for the past couple of years have been working on this project to create a new legal structure for creative work and for creative people that is explicitly not thinking about it as charity. I definitely reject the idea that art should be viewed as a charitable enterprise. Even with Kickstarter, we made a rule from the beginning that there could be no charitable fundraising on the site, that it all just had to be creative work, because we thought people used guilt and charity as means of excusing funding things that they needed to do, and let's make this positive and not about having to make someone feel okay for supporting you. So I'm trying to make a new sort of structure. A small group of us are trying to make a new sort of structure. Ironically, doing this has led to me creating my first nonprofit and my first ever experience in this world, which I do not particularly enjoy. And I don't know, I'm sitting here in this panel, I'm like, was that wrong? But there was I know. But there's a funny thing where we're trying to create a public good, trying to create a law and a structure that is not ownable, that everyone can participate in. And it's a hard thing to get people to fund. We were doing that work, we were still doing that work largely volunteer, but for several years, and trying to talk to people about funding it. And if we were willing to take a cut of every company that got started, if we're willing to do those things, there's lots of money there. But it was important, this is an unowned, this is a common resource that we need to create. And the only paths of people willing to support that were foundations. And so ultimately, to receive those funds, to pay the people to do the work that's happening, we have done that. But I want a world where you don't have to do that. Because I find the nonprofit world to be very strange. Because I also have a for-profit entrepreneurial experience, and when I talk to someone, a funder there, I understand what they're looking for. They're looking for like a good idea that makes sense and it will deliver a shared outcome that we both want. And talking to nonprofits, I can't tell what they want.
You want to balance their budgets.
They want to look good. So it's just been a little bit of more of a mystery for me.
Great. Thank you all very much. I am depending on you all to be in dialogue with each other, but I'm going to get you started here. One of the things I just want to play off what you were just saying, Yancey, which is just to speak a bit more about the things that go so unspoken in our field. I think for many of you who come from this field, I'm sure there's some of you who don't necessarily come from the arts, the nonprofit arts sector, not like the sector that was represented before in the last panel. We speak with such jargon that we don't even understand that we're doing it anymore. So I want to just note that we do like to talk about being part of the nonprofit sector. I think some of us without judgment, maybe it's something that just clarifies who we are. We all here, I think, on this panel, maybe think of it with a little bit of more judgment. In fact, I've been known to say that I'm looking to dismantle the entire nonprofit system in America, but not for today. But that was provocation. But I will say that I think we forget that the whole nonprofit system was built on the idea of charity, on charitability, and on passing charitability tests. I guess I wonder, from all three of you, how you think about you've already spoken to it a bit, Yancey, and maybe I want to just go back to David and to Kaneza a bit about this notion of charity and art making and how you've navigated those sort of divides over the course of your work.
I'm going to stand up for not-for-profits for a second because I feel like that is the world we're in. And I think if we're looking at all these different funding things as tools, the way to look at it might be you find the tool that works best for the situation you are in. So the way we have looked at our not-for-profit at Bang on a Can as being a tool of community building. So we deliberately, maybe this is a really stupid thing, but we don't have rich people on our board. We don't solicit multi-million-dollar gifts. We don't let organizations that want to work with us take advantage of us because they have money. We have turned down many money-making projects in the past, which is kind of idiotic when you think about it. But basically, we look at this as something which we have done to create a better field for the kind of peculiar music that we are interested in, this experimental music world and the world that surrounds it. So everything that we do has to do with how to build the community that wants to be part of this. So we have lots of activities which are designed to bring small donors together, and then we have parties for them and invite them to our shows, and we meet them. For a while, our board president was someone who I had met because he came to a couple concerts because he was dating a percussionist who was on our festival. And I managed to talk that person into becoming our board president after a while. You know, so we have a very, very different attitude towards this, but I think it's one that the not-for-profit world is suited to because we don't need a lot of money, and we are very frugal, and we think that there's a way to turn this story about people coming together to fund something which deserves to be funded into something which is a positive virtue. And again, it's not to say that that's the only way to do this, but for us it's been very useful.
David, I just want to just ask the follow-up. There's a corollary to what you're saying, to what you're implying, which is that the way you're viewing the nonprofit model is by taking control of it and actually building it within the values that you believe in. What are you protecting it from?
Well, no, that's a really great question because what happens is that in order to have a not-for-profit, you need a board of directors. And the way you are told to build a board of directors is, well, you need a lawyer, and you need an accountant, and you need a rich person, and you need a bunch of society people, and you need people who like parties. And very soon, you have a bunch of people who don't actually believe in your mission, right? Who don't actually like you or like the kind of thing you're trying to accomplish. And it's very common for people who have not-for-profits to see the organization drift or to see the people be thrown out of power because the board has decided that they are going to do something else. But the people on our board, well, there's my sister's best friend from junior high school who walked to my bar mitzvah. There's, someone who was in elementary school with the brother of Julia Wolf. You know, these are people who we've known for a million years, who are our friends, who believe in us and believe in our mission, and who we also, we want to continue making good art for them because we like them, you know. Part of what happened was that when I got a very good gig when I first graduated from Yale, which is I became the little composer in residence at the New York Philharmonic. And as part of that, one of my jobs was to deliver information to the board of directors that the real composer in residence didn't want to tell them. Because he had a career, right? And he, had to deal with all these rich people. So any bad news about programming, they gave this to me. And so part of what happened at Bang on a Can was our reactions to experiences we had in other organizations that we never wanted to duplicate ourselves.
Kaneza?
I think what David's bringing up is so important and is worth divorcing in our conversation, and then we can decide what we want to talk about. Because the exquisite, radical culture-building work that David has taken on in his practice as an individual composer, in how you relate to every artist you know in New York City as a human being, I am so grateful to be included in that list of people, and the culture you've built with Bang on a Can. The radical work of what it is to define and name the ecosystems of relating that we're in is critical and is not about tax code. The radical work of trying to get federal governments to reconsider how to promote, advance, and support income-driven arts organizations is a separate conversation. And I would argue between all of us, and with tremendous respect for my dear co-panelist, Yancey Strickler, and the work he's doing on artist corporations, I don't think the artist corporation law that got passed in Colorado is all that exciting. When he gets to the federal government, then we can talk. But the culture work that he is doing around artists having to define their economic relationships to each other on their own terms from the beginning, which God knows is broken in our culture here. Broken. Heartbreakingly broken. That work of creating a structure that makes us all work in the resources we actually work in, which are rarely money, and define how money is going to work or not work with us over time, that is radical. That's going to change the ecosystem. And the fact that that's getting promoted at the state level is wonderful. But until you get to the federal government and we start talking about philanthropic dollars and we start talking about patronage models fundamentally and development aid, we're not actually talking about tax code of the arts. And okay. And I think all of it matters. I think all of it matters.
Yancey, I think the floor is yours.
This is just the start. By the way, it hasn't even begun. Yeah, well, corporate law is set at the state level in the U.S. So
Strickler, your lawyers were my lawyers.
I know, we have the same lawyers.
We have the same lawyers.
But
Expensive ones.
But there is.
They're free for me.
I don't pay. So we're going to make corporate forms. Corporate law is set at the state level in the U.S. Each state has different laws. This is where Delaware is like the international standard for for-profit institutions because they have friendly case law and everything established there. So this project is going. It begins incrementally. The goal is to create a new. So what an A Corp actually is? It's a new variant of an LLC, a new type of an LLC that is pre-built to be designed for the best practices an entertainment lawyer will set up their client with if they're making something, as well as addressing some of the systemic challenges that exist with artists just being rounding errors in a larger system. So the A Corp is meant to help create things like group healthcare plans for artists and creative people, to create a new form of security in the A Corp share, so a fractional ownership of a practice or of a work or of a studio or of a joint venture that's very easy to create and very easy for artists to accept money to share ownership and pay each other that way. And to create that, you ultimately pass laws. So Colorado is the first place. Colorado will let you create an organization from anywhere. However, there are limits to what we can do at the state level versus federal level. For example, two big ones: intellectual property. Most law set around IP is set at the federal level. There's things we've done in the Colorado law that are more progressive for artists, but ultimately federal law supersedes it. And similarly for taxes. We do have a goal of making it that A Corps can directly receive philanthropic dollars, that they not have to receive a fiscal sponsor. The lawyer that Kaneza is referring to is very adamant about we can win this. That requires federal tax law change. There are federal tax laws every 8 years. The most recent one was the Big Beautiful Bill this year. So there will be another one in 8 years where we will fight for this. I also learned in talking to professional lobbyists that the cost to get an amendment in the tax bill is $3 million minimum. So like that's the cost to even just get something at the table. So there are, we do need those bigger changes for it to have the global sort of impact. But I think what the A Corp will find is that this year Colorado will be passed. Next year there will be laws presented in 6 to 8 U.S. states, including this one, including California, including a lot of the really big ones. And that we could find ourselves in a place in the next 2 to 3 years of having a real ecosystem that's begun to develop. And ultimately, I am less interested in what specific legal structure underlies an artist's work, like whether it makes most sense for them to be an A Corp or an LLC or an S Corp or a 501c3 or mix and match all of the above. But it is trying to create a understandable story that reframes what creative work is as something that is very value creating and something we all benefit from. And in making us as a workforce legible, so it lets us start getting benefits and being treated in a real way. So like just 2 very small examples of that, like in going to Colorado, I'm based in New York, but in going to Colorado, I thought I was going to convince people of this idea that the arts are valuable. And I never treated it as charity. It's always, this is a workforce that's under-equipped. And what I was surprised to find, especially with speaking with Republican senators and mayors in rural Colorado, Western Slope, rural Colorado ranchers, is they instantly understood this to an even greater degree than I did, because they would say, well, there's a town in my district that has these 2 sculptors there, and tourists go there, and actually the property values are higher there. And I know those sculptors don't do great, but I know that we all benefit. Like, it's so clear that we all benefit. And so something that supports those people, empowers those people, is like he was already there. He already wanted to do that. Just no one had presented an idea that, met sort of what he thought that could look like. So there is that level of appreciation and understanding, but how can we make that even bigger and grander? And how can we treat this not as, how can our parents be happy for us if we decide to pursue a career in the arts? How can pursuing a life in the career of arts not mean insecurity automatically? And I think that in the half decade, the decade to come, I do think that can change in a real way.
David, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I love all of that. I think it's really true, and I think it's really important, the work that you are doing. But it just reminds me how much artists' lives would be improved if we had universal health care. Because it seems like a lot of what we're talking about, is like how to support people who are already on the edge, who just want to do what they're doing and can't afford to risk being that far over the edge. So the fight for benefits is really fantastic and really important. But I know that so many things in my life would be easier, and in my students' lives would be easier if they were guaranteed health care. There's so many things, probably if you are biotech innovators, probably also, right? That's probably the thing that links us all together.
Kaneza, go ahead.
It's something about microfinance. It's something about all of the battles each of us have chosen to take on in our practices and where we want to push mighty needles forward together. Just something about looking at the places where value-based economics already exist and thrive. Things like the Grameen Bank, right? Like a lending institution that is already built towards a kind of localized small investment, or Islamic law, right? Lending practices that relate to not being vampiric. Yeah. And for me, I think that has been a big part of how I can think about the kind of tax code that I would like to see, that in Rwanda we have a little space to build, that is trying to think from a promotion of earned income, a promotion of self-sustainability, and relates to kind of the ethos of David's 501c3, whatever about the tax code, the microfinance logic that you have demanded live inside how everyone's transacting. That is what I'm thinking about, Emil.
Thank you, Kaneza. Did you want to jump in? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think, I think you're absolutely right. I confess, so I think come with maybe I don't know if it's a pessimistic point of view, a realistic point of view. I don't know what to say it is, but to me, the falling in stature and influence and belief of major American institutions feels like a real thing that is coming from all sorts of directions, and makes me, just looking forward, my trust feels low. And my desire to be a part of institutions and communities that I can touch or trust, or which I'm a principal or I'm like a person away, feels much more, I guess, both attainable and solid. The risk there is if we all give up on the dream, if we give up on the global dream, the universal dream, maybe it becomes impossible. Or maybe it's if we each have our locally universal dream, the same way a biological ecosystem sort of supports itself. Like maybe that is another way, but just saying out loud where my mind goes as I think about that.
I think you're right, but I also think that you're losing faith in the things that are large, that you can trust, that link us all, is intentional on the part of people who want you to lose that trust. And so the idea that we're here on the ground level trying to solve these problems on a microscopic level because we have been defeated by someone who is large and wants to defeat us, it may be that we are able to stand up and support ourselves and create our little micro worlds, but that shouldn't take away our obligation to try to get back to the place where we have something larger to believe in that links us all, I think.
There's this way too of I feel like particularly amongst artists, particularly amongst folks who have chosen, choice requires conditions to make choice, so I use that wobbly, chosen to immigrate to this country, who come here with other financial structures and ways of knowing and systems of accountability, who have always financially functioned otherwise in relationship to the major operational system. For example, West African hair braiders, susus, people pooling together money in order to buy a small business and move forward. And so there's also this way that I feel like for those of us whose survival has always been about operating otherwise, we do have this opportunity to just keep tinkering from the tools we have that have always that have always lived in opposition and possibility.
I will just jump in. Thank you, Kaneza, on that. There's so much in this regarding wanting to be hopeful and at the same time practical, pragmatic around the struggles we face because we know that is part of what makes us human. We understand that, and we do this in our work. I will say, just to your reference to susus, Kaneza, that my mother is actually part of a mutual aid society in New Jersey. And for those of you who don't know, the Koreans have migrated over to Palisades Park in New Jersey. And my mother, and this is just to say that these are ancient systems that we're hearing, but still are relevant in many cases today, but usually for cultures who have come from elsewhere and brought their cultures here. But she's part of a mutual aid society that takes care of fellow elders in their last days, regardless of wealth, regardless of need, but really because everyone wants to help each other. And in this case, my parents have been contributing to this mutual aid society for 30 years. And in each month, they get a statement that says who needs help. They say the name, the age, and the need. And if it's going into hospice, it's one thing. If it's a funeral cost, it's another thing. And you actually get a sense of all of this. And when my father passed away, all of his costs were covered by this mutual aid society. My mother, of course, will be paying for this until she also needs it at some point. My only point is this is not a new thing. This is ancient. I have an uncle who was a dry cleaner in the days when Korean dry cleaners were pretty new. And there is also a mutual aid society where Korean dry cleaners helped each other establish, when they came to America, establish these businesses. So these are things that can be done in a micro kind of way that you're talking about, Kaneza, that can actually maybe help teach some of the values that we've lost along the way. But I just want to move on and just talk a bit about some of these distinctions regarding language, because I think we're talking about I think, the broader art sector, but there are real key distinctions between artists and what artists need and deserve versus institutions and the art sector more broadly. I also have written about this and talking about how we tend to conflate the art sector for the institutions only and forget too often the role that artists play in that sector and the need that they have and that the systems and infrastructures that we don't have to support them because we assume somehow that the institutions will take care of them. I wonder how you all think about this distinction, this divide between the artist and the arts institution in the ways you're thinking about the future. Anyone want to jump in there?
Well, I mean, it feels like the last 100 years, there's been some symbiosis that's happened there of like the institutions came up around celebrating artists, and certain artists have been championed along the way. I think now we see artists able to create their own institutions, and so there's a little bit of maybe a learning of a modeling that's happening. It feels to me like we are moving towards a future of, like, there's a way I think that the future is either like 4 nations or like 100,000 nations. It's either like we all get subsumed into one giant thing, or we're just all just splintering further. And my instincts go towards splintering, and just that more of us are creating our sort of institutional frames, and an artist is a brand, and an artist is you would conjugate yourself and exist in so many forms. I don't think many people are able to just isolate and be the work. And it also feels like certainly a lot of the research that we were doing for A Corps and talking to a lot of artists, even artists that are existing through the nonprofit system, like you are running a studio as a small business. There are all those responsibilities you are taking on. That is just a part of the life. Maybe you have a good studio manager or operator that shares that burden, but that is there for you. And I just think that becomes more sophisticated, and we become more powerful through it.
I know we're not talking about federal tax code yet, which is all I came to talk about, but that's fine. I will answer your question. I direct opera. That's how I feed my child. And the thing about opera companies is they often function with a lot of financial wealth, and that's a primary resource in the ecosystem, how the money moves, how the unions talk to each other. With all of that, they can set a schedule far in advance. In an artist's life who's feeding her child, that schedule is very critical. My kid lives in New York City. If I have to travel and be in Los Angeles or Chicago or Houston for 3 months, that's very relevant. So I know 2030, I'm going to be in Chicago. I know 2028, I'm going to be in LA. It's great. I can make these plans. The other part of my life comes from making work from the beginning with people I admire and seeing what happens and not knowing. And I care so much about making work that way. I believe that's how we push ideas forward. I believe that's how we sustain the wellness of a culture. It is very hard when money is not the primary transactional resource to sustain independent creative practice. And what I am finding is that the real rub for me at this stage of my career is the schedule. it's not that I can't commit. We don't work in money. When we make things like that, that's money is not what makes that work happen. And so the thing that I've been thinking about is, okay, we can all set schedules together. We know about commitment. We know about these other resources. Let's make a piece. Let's decide we're going to make a piece. Because one nuanced thing about this little sector, but to get towards the larger point, is what's happening for me right now is the institutional jobs are sticking and the independent jobs are falling away. That's partially because there are shitty producers in the world who do not do their work well and do not have accountability to artists. That's part of it. The second part of it is that the institutions can set the schedules in advance, and so we can all commit and we can all plan our lives and eat and feed our children. So I care about this other independent kind of work, and the way we can do it is if we all commit to a calendar. And don't work in money, because money's not the resource, but then sell that together later, which is a very earlier model of how my practice worked anyways. And that is where I think about the structure of an artist corporation being a system of thought that would force us to be accountable in the ways that someone responsibly using a 501c3 would make, regardless. But it would be a system of thought that could propel my studio practice, combining with other people's studio practice, to say, we're going to make this work over the next 3 years on our own. Don't touch it. Don't talk to us. Don't look at us. When we are ready, you can buy it, and here are our terms. And that interests me about a structure that they'll listen to, which we can make in all of our ways, but somebody being out there pushing to get people excited is going to help us move the story forward that will allow the institutions to, if we do it this way, show up to the table with us and understand that we mean business.
Thank you, Kaneza.
I just want to tell a little story about schedules, because this is actually like a recent development, you know, and it comes out of marketing fear. I think people think, okay, well, I'm the Metropolitan Opera, and we have to, you know, raise more money than we thought. We need to sell tickets, which means we need these famous stars. We have to pay the famous stars more money. We have to book them so far in advance. So they know their schedule 4 or 5 years in advance. And I know this because my piece, The Wealth of Nations, which I just did at the New York Philharmonic, is being booked now for like 2 or 3 years. And the soloists in my piece are going, I'm too busy. I can't do it, right? I already know my schedule 3 years from now. So, you know, I am a college professor and a nerdy classical musician. I think I've established that. So I was reading in the biography of the famous conductor Kusevitsky, the conductor of the Boston Symphony in the 30s, who helped to found Tanglewood, and he said, and they did a huge amount of commissioning, and I forget the piece. I think it was Stravinsky's Symphony of Psalms, and I'm just reading this autobiography, and it says, oh, we did this piece, we premiered the Stravinsky Symphony of Psalms. It was really fantastic, so we decided to do it again 2 weeks later. That can never happen in the culture that we have built for classical music now, and the culture for lots of things, right? Everyone's schedule is so determined, but it's determined because of the fear of being able to raise enough money to actually do the work. I think back to your point, Emil, about communities and what we pay for or whatever. I mean, people make stuff and they share it. And we're always going to do that, right? That's what we do, right? We make art and we share it. We make it, we want to share it. We'd like to be paid for it, but most of all, we want to share it. We can be paid in other things, right? We can be paid in community value. We can be paid in love and respect. We can be paid in the bonds of fellowship with other creators. Like, there are lots of other ways that these communities pay for this work. But the thing that's important, I think, is the community building of that. So the conversation about what happens in art, I think, is about what kind of community we want to live in and what kind of things we want to have that connect us inside that community to each other. And the money part of it is really important, and the business part of it is really important, but I think it's a larger question of what kind of world we want to live in and how we want to live in it.
Thank you, David. I do want now to open it up to questions, and I already see a hand up. So please keep your hands up high after we get the first one. We have about like 5 or 10 minutes left, Francis. Is that right, or so?
We're going into lunch. I mean,
Oh,
yeah.
is
So
it, that's never a good sign.
no,
It's okay.
lunch will be there.
Okay.
If you want to take
Okay.
your time.
Yes, you in the back row, please.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for this. It's amazing. Because you just mentioned that there are many different ways of getting paid in the community, and there's many things that are valuable, not only the money, which is very important. And business is very important. So with that, my question is, as a business owner, how do you set metrics to know if your business has been successful that do not only depend on the money aspect of it?
Well, for a not-for-profit, it's really easy to see if you are successful. It's if you are losing enough money. The point of a not-for-profit is taking other people's money and losing it for a good cause. So the metric is very easy. Like, can you sustain this? Can you pay your workers and give them a living wage and health care? Can you continue to serve your audience and your needs? Are you flexible enough to be able to change when you have to change? So those are really easy. So we have these three businesses which I've created, right, with my friends. We have the publishing company, which makes money because that's our music, right, and that makes money. We have the not-for-profit, which breaks even, basically, sort of loses money creatively. And then we have the record company, which is a dead loss, But it's a dead loss for a good cause, right? So the measurement, like there is no measurement which is platonic standard by which everything can be valued. It's like, what are you prepared to lose money for, And I think about this all the time. I have my cousin's daughter just graduated from law school, and in her first job, just out of school, she already makes, like 10 times as much money as me. And, but I don't want that life, so I feel like I'm a success.
I just want to add one comment. When I was a funder, we did away with requiring impact reports, quantifying people served, because we actually know that those numbers are bullshit. We also know that they don't actually clarify anything to the organization. And so we've really focused ourselves, I'm just going to give this bit of feedback to you, focused on learnings and intentions. We really wanted to ensure that the grantee were very clear-eyed around their intentions behind the work. What are you hoping to achieve? What are you hoping to do? And then also, at the end of the day, what have you learned from it? Not whether or not it was successful, but what have you learned? And I think if we can spend more of our time looking at what we're learning, I think we'll be much better off.
Can I add that, I just think that question is so important, and I also want to clarify, like, I appreciate love, but when I talk about, like, no, the resource, I mean, who's picking my kid up from school? I mean, somebody who needed to get bailed out. I mean, someone is going to stop playwriting and become a film writer because she wants to do IVF, and we're like, whoa. Let's all pull some money together for you to do your IVF treatment. Please don't go to Hollywood. Please stay in New York 3 more years. And then that person does and makes plays that we even probably in this room know the name of. That I mean concrete stuff on that. And the metrics thing to me is really hard, but I make things that disappear. I make performance. So like I understand that as a fundamental perspective on life, like in a world that defines capital as my body and all these other things, I make things that disappear. I'm committed to that. I have found in this new world that I have fought and screamed about having, where why are you asking us to do these crazy reports that are meaningless? We all know they're meaningless. I have, however, found that one of the problems in the new ecosystem is how to render legible to Emil this scale of impact that our conversation has had, and how to render it legible to others, the scale of impact that my conversation with Justin has had in the world, how to render that legible to others. And so I think there is some next thing about metrics and accountability to the impact of the work that we know we're all doing that isn't just about running and is about that we do have to talk about it and we do have to find ways to be accountable to ourselves and community and others. And I'm excited about what that next model is.
I'm sorry, I'm going to try to get everyone here. Please.
Thank you for this really incredible panel. I come from visual arts, and I'm an artist here in New Haven. And I'm trying to figure out a way to create community for artists who graduate from Yale, from Gateway, and don't have a way of remaining in the area because they don't have a kind of stable way of sustaining their schedule of bureaucrats to pay for their kids, to pay for their families, healthcare, etc. And I would love for Kaneza and Yancey to just, maybe Kaneza, you could critique the A Corp and say, if it had this, this, and this, we can set up that base, you know, whatever it is, for those of us who, in our generation and younger, will not inherit any stable job at Yale, will not inherit tenure-track jobs in any institution, will not inherit some of the stability that people are lucky to have, whoever has it, that allows them to leverage it to do this other kind of work. We all want to do the other kind of work, but we have these limitations of how to feed the kid and how to kind of know that I can be in this city for a year. So what can happen, what can change the A Corp to bring it here, to make that possible for those of us who want to do these kinds of things?
I have no critique of the Artist Corporation. I think it is holy work. I think it matters. So I want to make that position very clear. What I think is radical about it is that the risk it takes to bet on yourself and others when you do not have generational support, let's call it crudely for the sake of efficiency and lunch. It requires it requires culture. It requires cultural accountability to one another. And so how do we build that when we have many different cultures functioning simultaneously? And I do think that what's powerful about this so far, I think it's a public benefit LLC with a metal label bow. But what's powerful about it is that it's pushing us to have these conversations. It's giving us a structure in which institutions are asked to come to the table with those conversations in the way we are coming to the table with those conversations, and in its ideal scenario, listening to us before it listens to others. So I feel great about what's happening in Colorado. I feel great about what's coming next. Fundamentally, the conversation is about the Western arts coming from a patronage model. What are we even talking about? And we need to talk about federal tax code.
Yeah, plus one. Plus one, everything Kaneza said. I mean, I think what it could allow you to do practically is it would, I mean, you could do it with an LLC too, but you could create some sort of collective structure by which you as a class participate. You could build in some of the mutual aid sort of things that are being talked about. At a bigger scale, maybe there could be some institute for artists who graduate from Yale and want to be a part of a larger consortium of maybe you pay back part of your earnings, you know. But it does create a path for defined shared resources. It also creates legal protections and things based, you know, just for you as an individual. But as an organizing tool for a group of people, it does create a very legible, easily defined, shared ownership, financial flow structure. The challenge is the A Corp alone does not create new forms of money to enter that. So there still has to be capital that's interested in that, right? And so a part of this project, the longer term part of the project, and another aspect I'm working on is speaking with cultural funders and getting them comfortable with the idea of, you know, we put money into A's now, and talking to philanthropists and creating structures with like a DAF that will allow them, a donor advised fund, that will allow them to put money into something like an A Corp. But we have to get the money side comfortable and excited to bring to bring a net benefit just by taking that step. So that won't magically happen on its own. That's another piece of this that has to be established.
I just want to clarify one thing. I didn't inherit a job at Yale, as you said, and I spent most of my life as a professional composer, as a scrappy freelancer going all the way around the world, doing, really bad projects at huge cost to my children and family. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've helped to build an organization which is dedicated to making the lives of freelancers better, because that's the world I come from.
Thank you.
Sorry, it wasn't meant to be like that.
Well, I think it's really important because the life of an artist is a life of struggle that we accept, and we take that on intentionally. And part of what you are saying about how to build a better community is something that you need because you know that the life is really terrible. And I just want to let you know, I've lived that terrible life.
They're not doing that right now, but there just aren't those opportunities. Not even those 5 opportunities.
Let's take 3 more questions, and the lady in the back of the glasses, you first. Wait, hold on, and then right here in the front, and then 3. 1, 2, 3.
Say to you, I want that kind of language to stop. Because as artists, we're not all struggling. We're not. It's not a horrible life. And I think when we change that dialogue, then we can change the dialogue of how money comes to us. Right? Because if you start with struggle, then that's what you end up with, a struggle. So if you speak in affirmations and you speak with authority, like, I am an artist. I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud of what I create. Then you have now the beginning of a new conversation that allows for money to flow to you because you're being positive about it. And energy meets energy when we're talking about finances in so many ways. So I just wanted to just say that to you and not put down what you're saying, but let you know that that's the kind of language that keeps us and the people in society believing that it is a struggle, that it's not worth investing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to keep going with the 2 more questions we have here. Yes, please.
Yes, my question is specifically for Kaneza, because I just wanted to hear more about your journey of establishing the organization in Rwanda, and because I'm from Vietnam, and one of the things that I have the opportunities in the far future is to be able to set up the ecosystem of theater and performing arts in Vietnam, because infrastructure are being built. It's similar where we have all these development and money, but however, now they're asking the questions of how do we set up that ecosystem. And so I really wanted to know your journey in setting up, and because a lot of developing country have this idea that America is the right way, the nonprofit models. I've been getting a lot of questions of can we apply that back to Vietnam? And I'm like, I don't, there's problems. So I'd love to hear about your journey through that.
Kaneza, can I ask us to...
I'll make it short.
Okay.
The first thing is, do you
I don't know
know
why I'm
about
believing
San
you.
Art? And if you don't know about San Art, look them up. And those are homies, and you got to meet them. That's the first most important thing.
You say Stan?
San Art. It's an organization in Ho Chi Minh City. The next thing is the 5 sentences. We started Gihanga Institute of Contemporary Art as a community benefit company, which is essentially a public benefit LLC if you try to translate it to US tax code. The problem is that as a public benefit company, we cannot earn income other than membership income. I've joined you as a member. What is exciting is that Rwanda is a small country, and we have the opportunity to resist, even as we build a fancy, shiny cultural institute that all the people visiting the country want to come see. We have the opportunity to build it outside of some of the culture we've inherited by hanging art on walls in the way that we have. One of the ways that I think we can promote public benefit, functioning from a place of empowerment and fiscal responsibility is to invest in income generating model and tax codes that promote income generation in companies that are pursuing public benefit. The challenge I see to convincing a government of this relates to metrics and our first friend's question. And what is not a challenge is that this is how everybody functions anyways. You have a lockbox in the community, the guy who's buying some goats, the chick who's putting her phone kiosk together with wood instead of cardboard, all put together $5, and then that $5 goes, and this person does that, little farming on the side. That is the culture of how money is moving anyways, and so that is the strength we have in trying to deal with the metrics questions that are going to come up when we say, no, this is about earning money.
Okay, last question, please.
I just heard a podcast with Ray Madoff. She's a tax policy professor at Boston University. And I was dumbfounded by the level of theft that's been perpetuated by the upper 1% and the baby boomers on our country through the effective neutering of the estate tax, through non-taxation of stock ownership. I mean, we could go on, right? There's the $1.8 billion given to the Capitol rioters, which is 9 times more than the NEA gets. So my question really for Yancey is, how does lobbying in the legislative process work in our favor so we can win some of that back? And more specifically, what are we asking for in the legislative houses that can be effective so that we can punch back, because we've been defeated?
Well, definitely local politics works very different than federal politics, for